we're working for a common goal, is that to serve the customer at the end of the day. I want to help you meet the needs of your customer, which collectively is our customer. So when you speak in that language, no one really runs from that. Usually they run to that, especially if you have something that you can offer.
Hi, Michael, and welcome to the show. And just wondering if you would tell us a little bit about yourself.
Laurette, thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here with you. Michael Byron. I've been in retail for 30 plus years. My background is primarily merchandising and retail operations. So, from negotiations to purchasing to people development. I've been in that space, as I said, 30 plus years. However, the last 17 years of my career has been spent in supplier diversity. And, for me, it's where I found my purpose, actually. I love selling. I love providing for the customer. I love teaching associates how to sell and how to engage with customers. But the work that I have done as the former head of supplier diversity for Walmart, it really helped me find my purpose. And before Walmart, Super Value. I would tell you that, when I think about how, sometimes a conversation can connect the right people, and having the ability to do that and the seed of influence to make those things happen, especially if they become, uncomfortable in some cases, because, people still have, biases toward inclusion. While it's been challenging, it's been rewarding as well. And I think for me, I continue to try to, leverage that even in my third act. I'm sort of like Venus Williams these days. I've evolved from corporate America, and I'm still doing a similar work.
So I think we should talk a little bit more about the role of supplier diversity, because some of our listeners might not understand that, coming from a different world than we do. So we met at a WeBank meeting, which stands for Women Business Enterprise National Council. And this is where diverse suppliers, such as women businesses, I guess for WeBank, that's really the focus. We get to meet with corporate suppliers. And supplier diversity professionals are who we are working with. So I think that it would be kind of interesting for our listeners to kind of understand how that works. And your past life, Walmart, was a huge force behind that. And I think there's some great stories there.
Yeah, yes, indeed. I would tell you that supply diversity is, if we level set, it's 50 plus years old. And so it all started back in the 60s in Detroit. And the three big automakers, the federal government mandated contracts for women and minority businesses, set asides, if you will, carve outs. They call them all kinds of things. Fast forward, many of us in this space are not mandated to do supply diversity, but we know that it's good for our business. And that's how it started for a lot of folks. When I think about the retail space, it was really a good thing to do, right? And then it moved to, we realized it's good for our business, my goodness. And then we realized that we need to
I want you to talk
strategic
about that too, because I love where you're going. And you probably know these stats off the top of your head, but there's a lot of stats that talk about why diversity of all sorts is good for business. Is there any stats that you have that you are like, oh, that's a powerful one of why diversity is so important?
Well, when I think about Walmart in it itself, one powerful stat for me at Walmart is that we serve America, and we're within 10 miles of 90% of America. So if you just take that stat and understand, when we say America, who's in America and who's within 10 miles of a Walmart store, that in of itself is what got me up in the morning to do this job, right? The customer was really my main focus, right? Finding folks like you and others to service the customer in the way that she wanted to be serviced, be it product or service, if you will. And so, I think about that. That led me, and typically when I talk to my colleagues, I would tell them the same thing. But when I think about supply diversity, Red, it's really what it does is it forces you to use your sort of business acumen. If you come from the business background, as I did, but also it is about your influence, your interpersonal skills, your ability to have the conversations, even if they're tough. And of course, we borderline on gender equality and race relations in this. This is really, it's a tough conversation for a lot of my colleagues. And while there's not necessarily a school where you go get a degree for this, but there are numerous certificates and things of that nature. But it really boils down to relationship building, right? At every level of the organization in order to make this beneficial. So that, like you, I was a member of the Women's Business Enterprise National Council, and I sat on the board for several years. So what I said externally and what I did in support of my company as a representative of my company, my goal was to make sure that you encountered what I said while external, internal at Walmart. And that doesn't mean, that everyone got to do business. But what it means is that we were accessible, we're open, and we'll take a look at anything and everything that makes sense for our business at the end of the day. But I
Which is
think
a labor of love. I mean, I remember
it
being at
is.
those annual conferences, which there's 30,000 people or something at those, I'm not sure, but seeing lines outside of the corporates such as Walmart, Pepsi, Nestle, of diverse suppliers just wanting a conversation with you and
Yes,
and the
yes.
other supplier diversity managers of the corporates. And I think I would love to hear your John Lewis story that you shared with me once. I think that was very inspirational.
Yeah, he was visiting us at Walmart for Black History Month, and I got a chance to be in the green room with him, and we were talking. We took some pictures, etc. And there were a group of us, and so he and I, after we took the photo, we were face to face, and he said, "Hey, I've been at Walmart twice," and he said the first time was over 20 years ago, and he said uh, the room didn't look like it looks today. And that's what he was pretty much saying. And people like me in leadership, people that look like him in leadership, it wasn't as plentiful as it was. So he simply said, hey, you're here for a reason. And so you need to use your seat of influence for good. And when you hear back when he talks about getting in good trouble, I got in a lot of good trouble at Walmart. And even before that at my former company, Super Value, which is where I started a program. And that good trouble is rooted in conversation, is really what it is, right? It's not, we're not trying to provoke anyone in these positions, but we get to tell the truth, and we get to talk about what the company has said we're going to do. So in both cases, and at least at Walmart, our CEO said we would be inclusive in this space. And he had a value proposition around inclusion. And so I linked to that. And I reminded every associate that I encountered who had fiduciary responsibility or not, that this is something that the corporation expects. And I'm
Yeah,
just
talk
sort of a
about
check.
that goal, Michael, I love that. And that it came from the top really probably did give you power in your influence.
Well, when I first joined the company, we had a goal to source $20 billion from women-owned businesses, and
20 billion with a B. That
20
is
with a
big,
V.
big,
Yes,
big. Think of
yes.
the lives
And
you impacted on that. Wow.
indeed, when you think about that, and then it was, we started it in 2012, we concluded it in 2016, early 2017, and we had exceeded it by $1 billion. And so, when you have yeah, you have something like that you're trying to do in the organization. It's pretty big, and and when you do that, you're also changing behaviors, right? So it was more than just going for a goal. It was really trying to change the behaviors and mindsets of people around this subject. And it's kind of like I liken it to the cut curb effect, that took place in California years ago for people in wheelchairs, right? At the end of the corner, you had that curb cut, right? So as we worked toward equality for women in the supply chain, we were helping all folks at the same time. So while I was pursuing and the company was pursuing that $20 billion, we were lifting supplier diversity in totality. And
That's
so
so true.
we showed a lot of
Consciousness of
improvement.
it, even understanding the value of it, and really,
Yes.
like you said, changing behavior. And I feel
Yes.
like being a woman owned business and knowing what you do and what others in your role do, so much of it is development. And I think that's really nice to talk about that, because you're right. Not everybody's going to be ready to supply Walmart. And you guys invest a lot of time, or you had, and then a lot of the other corporates do too, in developing that supply chain.
Yeah, that's critically important. And that's information sharing, right? I mean, that's at the precipice of it all. Because, it's wonderful to get a contract, but you could get a contract and still not know how to operate within Walmart or any other corporation for that matter. So development is really key in that. But I think also when we're out at the yearly meetings like the Women's Business Enterprise National Council, and we're sit on panels, or we're, in group sessions, or we're a keynote, or whatever it might be, it's important that, we're providing that accessibility to suppliers so that they can get what they need to prepare themselves, even if they aren't looking to do business with Walmart today, tomorrow, or, in 5 years, but at least they know what is
Right.
required. And I
Okay,
think
that's a
that's
really good point, because I'm reminiscing of you and I meeting. And I was on a panel. I can't remember the topic of it, but I remember Pepsi, maybe Nestle, and some others, and a couple of us women-owned businesses were on the panel. And I was walking down the aisle, and you're like, "Hey, we need to talk." And I was like, "Yay!" But I think that's good advice for women-owned or any diverse-owned company to put yourself out there and to put yourself on the panels with the corporates and really get that relationship to help you meet more people.
Yeah, that's the power of the network. That's what you just said. And that's why I think it's so valuable to become part of those networks, because it's rich. I mean, you have people who are varied degrees of experience and maturity in their businesses. And so there's a lot of networking and mentoring that happens, not just with the corporates, but women businesses to women businesses. And I've seen some really, really big successes there.
So I think you know Brooke Foley from Jane Agency probably pretty well, and
yes,
she's a good friend of mine. And during the COVID, we started that it's not just dinner virtual. I don't know if did you ever make any of those? I'm sure I invited you, but I'm not sure if you ever made one. We kind of had to pivot. So they used to be real live dinners, obviously at the annual, and each of us diverse companies would invite a couple corporates, et cetera, and a couple other diverse women businesses. So really like a not sell, a not pushy, just kind of a network, chill, teach, especially women that just had gotten their certification, because it's not as easy as it sounds. You get the certification and the sky does not open. You really need some mentorship and some people to help you navigate a pretty tricky political landscape. So I think that was profound in the fact that we all helped each other. So it wasn't always leaning on the corporates, it was leaning on each other.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, that's the power of the network. Absolutely.
But I would love to hear a story of when you might have discovered a diamond in the rough in a diverse company and you were trying to open doors at Walmart for this company. Talk about some of the struggles of that.
Yeah, one of the jobs that my team had, or at least I sort of, made, sure that it was at the top of the food chain for them, is that coming from a business background, it's all about measurements and performance. How are the suppliers doing? So the last thing I ever wanted was for one of my merchants to ask me how the supplier is doing. They should know that, number one. But if they were asking me, then they were testing me to see if, in fact, if all I am about is connecting people and not ensuring that they're growing along with the company, then, is that real for us? And so I would tell you that, there's a host of stories I can tell about suppliers. But, in my analysis, as my team would run analysis on suppliers, I always like to look at a 3-year view, right? Especially if they've been with us 5 to 10 years. I like to look at a three-year block. And I was looking at a supplier who was in, multi-millions, probably 20 million or so, and had been there in that area, for probably 20 years. And I'm thinking, great product, really making, invigorating the category, if you will. But then I thought to myself, that's kind of odd because, you could see other businesses growing beyond that. And, what is the issue here? And so really what it came down to was really going to our merchants and making a recommendation that we sit down and we talk with the supplier to understand what else they can do. What's their capacity? And typically for small suppliers, some of our folks, merchants, they have, the P&Gs of the world. These are the people that if they make one mistake, they could turn their P&L upside down. But when you think about the women adverse suppliers that you have, you know, some of that you could make up if you are being strategic with those who have the capacity to do it. And not all will, right? So you could have on average, you know, 10 diverse suppliers per category. But if you're not looking for those that you could really build, then you're missing a, you know, a huge opportunity for innovation, agileness, and, you know, cutting the red tape. And so I found the company, several during that time, and even up to my last days of Walmart, making recommendations to folks on companies that we should sit down. And we had a thing called joint business review, right? And it was really around looking at their businesses, looking at your business, if you will, to see what would it take to grow from where you are today. And then what you find out, you start to unlock value. You understand that, hey, there's more capability with this company than what we knew. I mean, they're doing great where they are, and we're thinking it's great, but they'd like to grow, and we need to grow, and we need to invigorate this category beyond where it is. So let's have a conversation. And through those conversations, growth happened. And I would tell you that that same company that I'm talking about was in the ready to drink space, was 20 years, around 27 million. Last year, they finished at 170 million.
Wow. Wait, now you got to pause and feel really good about that, because
Oh, yeah,
that
absolutely.
is, I mean, we're going to get to this question later, but I mean, that's some legacy building stuff right there. You
Oh, absolutely.
influenced that. I'm sure, you know, you're going to say, I didn't do it, that, you know, I opened the door or whatever, but you shined the light where it needed to be shown.
Yeah. And that's the thing about, you know, supply diversity professionals. You know, you have to be able to do that, but also the organization needs to afford you that opportunity as well, right? So for me, when I think about my time in business, so many of my colleagues respected the fact that I was a merchant. So I know what I'm talking about, right? I'm not looking at these numbers just for the sake of looking at them. I'm trying to figure out how to grow our business, collective
You're
businesses.
I think your strength was you could build a business case scenario of why
That's
this is
right. That's
important,
right.
why this is good
Yeah.
for Walmart, why this is good for the business. And that you're right. And I feel like we meet a lot of supplier diversity people in our world that don't have that credibility, don't have that business acumen, and it's challenging for them. And sometimes, as we were saying, they can just be a figurehead, and how demoralizing and hard that must be for them as individuals.
Yeah, you know, the corporate culture has to afford you that opportunity, right? And when you do that, and listen, I had some conversations that didn't go so well either, but in time they did, right? People, you know, as I always said, you know, I think when you first start talking to people, there's like, why? Well, they know the answer already, but they want to use that as a way to deflect you from coming into their business and asking the hard questions and having
Exactly.
sometimes the difficult
It's
conversations. But I
silos,
was,
right? You got to protect
yeah.
your own
Oh,
space.
yes.
And
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
Michael, who are you to say I should be using this or that, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. But who I am is a representative of the company, and I'm focused on the customer just like you are at the end of the day. And don't forget that the supplier is a customer as well. Her family are customers, her friends are customers, her sphere of influence. These are customers as well. And if you're talking about you know, spreading the word about, you know, Walmart being accessible, or any company for that matter, suppliers can do that because they
Yes.
tell their families and they tell their
That's
friends. And
so true. And you think
yeah,
of this next generation coming up, they really care about the values of the companies that they buy from. I always think of Tom's Shoes, and when that just came out and they donate a shoe for, or a pair of shoes for every shoe that you buy. And my kids were like all over that. You know, they believe in giving back. They believe, they want to know in the values of where they buy from. And I think it's just going to get more and more and more important.
oh,
And I love
absolutely.
your conversation about finding that diamond in the rough when you were describing that company that had such growth right before you left. We've had a situation we run into preferred vendors all the time. I think I've talked to you about this, but just recently a story, a customer that we're working with, and they work with a big coffee manufacturer, and they didn't know of us, and we're, you know, experts in dairy and non-dairy is our niche and our expertise and our absolute strength. So this customer was working on a project and found us, the R&D side of the business. And this is often how it happens with us. We made her look great. We made their product look great. She was so ecstatic about us solving her problem that she came back time and time again. So I think we're on the fourth or fifth project with her, this individual R&D person. Her procurement department said, who is Ed Long? Why are we working with Ed Long? Why aren't we working with the big guys like we always have? And she defended us, and her boss defended us and said, this is our dairy and non-dairy dairy partner, and we're sticking with them. So it's not a diverse situation in this case, but same story, right? Having to prove that you can compete with the big guys is a diversity issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and it's a bias, right? Because you think small right away, and you think it's going to cost you more. You don't think they have the efficiency. So those are
and the agility.
Biases.
Your word agile is a word we use all the time. Our agility, we could knock that out of the park, and we're privately held. We don't have bureaucracy. Can make long-term decisions and not short-term. Based on what's going on in Wall Street. And it's singing that tune. And I feel like at the core of diversity and supplier diversity programs, it's about that. It's about bringing to light companies that just need a little bit of help opening the door, and making those connections.
Indeed. And I think if nothing else, if post pandemic and during pandemic and through pandemic, we learned that, right? I mean, we had a lot of disruptions in the supply chain, and it was a lot of diverse companies.
And that's such a good point, Michael. Yes. So we stayed, I think we were 95 to 98% on time and full, even through this crazy supply chain stuff. And we know that many of our customers came to us and said, so-and-so can't supply. And I got to just, my hats off to my supply chain team, because they are magicians and I don't know how they pull it. And having the ability to have foresight of what to order. We had larger inventory, which would have at another company required the CFO, me as the CEO, to sign off. I got a call from my Lloyd. He said, I'm ordering more stuff. I said, go for it. I trust you. And it was beautiful.
Yeah. Well, and we all experienced that same thing. I can talk to dozens of my colleagues. I don't care what business they're in. They all said the same thing, that a lot of the diverse suppliers were shining during that time because of the flexibility, agility to meet the needs of the customer really fast in a time of need. And we were all experiencing that. And so for me, that was a good time for me to see diverse suppliers gain business. And I spent a lot of time talking to our business folks about those diverse suppliers retaining that business after the larger companies got whole again.
All right. So that is brilliant. And that is so true, because you don't like to be the used one. You don't want to be the one that comes and saves the day and then they're going to go back to. So we did learn some of that too, where, it's not wrong to ask for a contract, not wrong to ask for at least there's enough abundance in the world. We could share this business, what have you, and get creative on, that's karma stuff to me.
It is. I think if I were, as I'm telling businesses today, and as I told them before, prior to me leaving corporate America, is that you're CEOs of sizable companies. You have the right to ask for what you want to keep your business healthy. And if you're in a time like that where they say, hey, Ed Long was just great, and all the accolades they give you, and yet you don't retain that business, there's something wrong. Did you really mean what you said about Ed Long, that they were fabulous, they were on time, they saved us, they were really an integral part of our business during this time? If that's the case, why wouldn't they have the ability to earn that business now, right? They've earned it through the trial and error, quite frankly, right? But now
and
that
sometimes do you think the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing sometimes in those situations? And you're right. It's up to us to be brave enough. And I'd say that to all supplier diversity or diverse companies that, you have to be brave enough to have those conversations.
Yeah, you do. And when you have your supplier diversity representative, he or she should be courageous enough to have those with you, right? And, sit in the gap with you to talk through that and at least get the conversation and make sure that it's at the level that it needs to be, right? Because the person that does the transaction with you, sometimes that's that's the fear of influence that they have is just the initial, contract. Here's where you are, but the strategy thought process is sometimes at a higher level than they are. That's not to, minimize those roles, but, as a
No, I
CEO of
think
a company.
that's the key role of supplier diversity, at least in the value I got from all of you was helping me navigate that and know, are you talking to the right level? Are you on the right strategic projects?
That's right.
We know we have to do the work, but that guidance was invaluable.
Yeah, yeah, and it's important, and you deserve to have that. You're running a business. I always said to our folks, look, you're just like our CEO of the Fortune 1. He's busy. He's got lots going on. He's got to care for 2.2 million people around the world, and you've got 200 people you've got to care for. It's the same thing. It's just a different scale, right? And so believe me that if he needed to ask for something to make our business healthy, he will do it and not ever hesitate to do that, right? And so you should do the same. And it's all in respect and collegiateness. And we're working for a common goal, is that to serve the customer at the end of the day. I want to help you meet the needs of your customer, which collectively is our customer. So when you speak in that language, no one really runs from that. Usually they run to that, especially if you have something that you can offer that's invigorating, innovative, and and it's where the customer is right now in terms of how she purchases, what she uses, what kind of ingredients she's looking for, whatever it might be, right? So I think,
Right.
as
And I
I
like the
tell
other
entrepreneurs,
aspect. I think you're right. I mean, it has to be respectful conversations, and they always are. And I'd say,
yeah,
particularly in the food industry, we deal with great people, which I love. Um, but I think the other strong power that the corporates have is pushing us as diverse suppliers to have our own diversity program.
yeah,
I
and
love that. If you're going to ask for it, you better walk the talk as much as you can. It might not, of course, it's not going to be the numbers that you guys are dealing with, and even as the owner and CEO of Edlong, that's a challenge. I have to constantly remind people if we have this was a couple of years ago now, but a big landscaping project, and we didn't have a woman-owned version in our bids, and we ended up going with a woman-owned, and she did phenomenal. And she does all of the city of Chicago. Why would we not have her in the running? So I have to constantly remind, are we being diverse? So I can only imagine, and that's on the
or
scale of your
or
job.
rather diverse. Are we being inclusive, right? So
Inclusive,
and
yes.
yeah, and that's really wonderful because every year I had a survey that went to probably the top 30, 40 suppliers that drove the bulk of my spend about where they are as it relates to their supply chain inclusion, right?
Yes.
And so many
And
of
when
them,
you ask that
yeah,
question, it makes
yeah,
your suppliers stand up and take notice, which is
absolutely,
using your power for good. Back to
yeah, yeah,
using
absolutely.
your seat at the table for good.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just a simple request, and people begin to think about that. And you're right. It's not about the size of the number. It's about the intent. Are
Right.
you doing what
And the
you're expecting?
growth, just like you
And
were
the growth.
saying, making sure that
Yeah.
there's growth and there's,
Yeah.
yes. So, what are you most proud of in your career?
You know, you know, listen, I thought about that a little bit as I saw the question. When I managed P&L's control product flow, it really was about customer satisfaction at the end of the day. And talent development. I wanted to make sure the associates had what they needed to deliver to the customer at the end of the day. And then it was, about my supplier partners, right? That was always the focus for me. Are they growing? And if they're growing and they're growing in the right way, then they're going to reinvest in my business, which then allows me to reinvest in my customer, which then allows me to keep my people working, right? So there was this sort of flywheel that I used for all the work that I did from a strategic standpoint, right? But in the latter part of my career, when I started to think about this work, it was really about creating, I would say economic systems, right? And creating a level playing field, through the conversations that I was having, albeit some of them were very difficult, at the end of the day. But it was that educating people on the subject and why it was important and why this swath of well mannered, well minded, rounded people who could do business with big corporations. Why are we not? Why do we have biases toward that. Let's get rid of those because all of those are in your mind. You might have seen that. You may have experienced it. Well, it doesn't mean that the next person is not going to be able to, conquer that, if you will. And I think, creating inclusion champions, that's probably one of the most, things that I'm proud of, people that you talked to 5 years ago who are now champions for the work that you do. And then, the impact that you make on lives, right? Something I was going to do, if you don't mind indulging me, but, Mark Twain had a saying, the two most important days in your life is the day you were born and the day you find out why. Right.
Ooh.
And when I think about my why, I go back to, if you don't mind, I'm going to indulge you in an email that supplier read me, right? Here's a box that I keep I call it my love box. Can you see that?
I can. I love that. It's beautiful.
And that sat in my office.
We all need a love box, don't we?
Yeah. Yeah. It sat in my office for 10 years at Walmart, and it's full of cards and notes and emails. But I dug through it today because you were going to ask that question, and it goes along with legacy as well. But it was a supplier of mine that emailed me back in 2018 and said it was so nice to put a face to the emails and conversations we had over here. Mind you, I knew her from my former company. We'd never met in person, but we met over email, and she got to do business with us over email, but we had never met. And so she goes on to say, it was exciting to finally get to meet you in person. I want to take a moment to sincerely thank you for your guidance. You have always been helpful, insightful. And then she said, but Michael, most importantly, I wanted you to know how much it meant to my son, who she was bringing into the business, who was reluctant to come into the business. She'd sent him off and said, you got to go work here before you come in. But, he wanted to come in and be in charge, right? But he had to understand, he had to learn the business. But she said, my son, it was important that he heard what you said. You're such an inspiration. He's a young man trying to find his way. As you know, there are highs and lows in owning a small business. But after speaking to you, he left feeling like he could do this. She said, normally you go on sales calls and it is what it is. Yes or no, but meeting you was so much more. Thank you so much, Michael. But wow. It's her son. And today he's an executive vice president in his mother's company, right? And that was in 2018. And I got lots of letters like that.
Well, I certainly hope he's started in operations or sample room, or because I know that exactly. Oh, yeah. It's where I started. And it's so true. You can't start at the top. You got to learn what everyone's going through. You got to really understand the business from that perspective.
Well, what helped was that he'd heard this before, right, from his mother, but it stuck because he heard it from someone else, right?
Yeah, that's so true.
He was sitting at a sales call with his mother, and he was not there. He didn't have a role, but he was just sitting listening. And I finally brought him into the conversation, and we were able to exchange. And then I watched for probably the next half hour how many notes he was taking at the time. He didn't say a word. He might have added an ad lib here or there, but for the most part, he was writing the entire time. But there are so many letters that I've received from suppliers when I think about proud moments that remind me, and also kept me afresh during the times when I thought, God, this is hard, right? So then I go read one of these letters and realize that, okay, this is the impact. This is the purpose for me. Yeah, absolutely.
I love that Mark Twain quote that you said. And it made me think as you were saying it, and you said that you feel like when you stepped into supplier diversity, this is my purpose. So what in your childhood, I feel like there's something in your childhood or your youth that was leading you this way that maybe you didn't realize, or talk about how you knew the light went off for you.
Growing up, I grew up around entrepreneurs. My uncle, my dad, other African Americans in the city where I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, right? And so these were, pillars of community. You own a business, you own your brownstone. You didn't see a lot of people that had that. So for the few that did, you studied that, right? I studied my uncle, and I would tell you, I probably was 7 years old when I was introduced to retail. Honest to God. And it was all because I couldn't eat the public school lunch. And I was coming home starving every day. And my mother says, "What's wrong with you? Why aren't you, did you eat your lunch?" "No, I can't eat it. It's terrible." So she went over to my uncle's luncheonette and said, I want him to come here to the lunch at school. He says he can't eat it. Would you be okay? And yep. And so there it went. My uncle had a luncheonette. He made hamburgers, fish, different things like that. And while he was preparing my lunch, like an entrepreneur he was, not only did he have a luncheonette, but he had a grocery shelf inside that luncheonette where you could buy, detergents, things like that. And, then you would have the supplier who would come in and deliver every couple of days products. And while he was preparing my lunch, my job was to open those cases and put those cans and boxes on that wood shelf that he built for the customer. And he would say, "Michael, make sure that every one of those labels are turned out and make sure you write the price on that where people can read it," right? Because at that time, I just had a magic marker writing the price, 59 cents, and just make sure that it's legible, right? But that was my introduction to retail, not knowing that later on it would become my life's work. But I saw entrepreneurship as a path, but I also saw myself being in corporate America through the Black Enterprise magazines and some of the magazines that used to sit on my coffee table at home, right? I saw Black men in suits and ties sitting in offices, and I'm thinking, man, I could do that. I'd love to dress up and go to work, right? Well, the latter became my life, quite frankly. I don't know if I was cut out to be an entrepreneur, but, I wound up working with lots of entrepreneurs. But it was really that moment working with him. And then later, as I went on to college, working with my dad, he had a catering business, and I watched how both of them treated customers, suppliers. And in my uncle's case, he had tenants in his apartments. And all of the folks that I did encounter during that time, I watched how they took care of the community, and they gave back. And now they were firm, they were tough. Like, people would take advantage of you, if you allow yourself to be a little bit vulnerable. But I learned that you had to be in order to get the best out of people. And I watched some of those same people who needed a hand up wound up giving a hand up to somebody else because my uncle did, or my father did, or some of the other people of the community did that. And so I think that's really what led me to retail and people management, and watching and seeing how, those folks interacted with folk, and then your experiences, right?
Right. I think it gave you empathy for entrepreneurship for sure.
Oh, of course. It did. It
I
did.
think it's funny that your uncle made you work for your lunch was probably
He
very
did. He
wise.
did.
It was
And
wise of him.
what was so funny is when my mom came to settle the bill at the end of the week, she's thinking it's going to be so much, right? Because I'm like piling on. Yeah, I want a hamburger, French fry, and I want a
Right?
slice of cake.
You're having a good lunch. I had peanut
I'm
butter and
having a
jelly
good
and
lunch.
whole wheat bread. It was dry. It was horrible.
Exactly. But at the end of the week, it would be, I'm making it up, it would be $15. He charged my mother $5. And she said, "Why?" She says, "I know he ate more than that." She said, "Yeah." He said, "Yes, he did, but he worked. See that shelf over there? That's his. He takes care
That
of that."
is awesome. That is a great
And
story.
so I was working and, being fed at the same time, both literally and, from a career perspective, I think my uncle was sewing into me about doing the right thing, being excellent at what you do, and making
Those
it right
uncles
for
are
the customer.
sneaky. We were just
They are. They are.
they're
They
very
are
sneaky.
indeed.
I hope I'm that sneaky of a niece, or of a not of a niece, of an aunt to my nieces, particularly, but to all of them. But
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
as you're talking about that, I think of that female strong saying that we say all the time, she can't be it if she can't see it. And it's the same for
Mm,
everybody. You need to
that's
see
right.
those role models and have those special conversations and special relationships in your life that show you what
Yeah.
it could be.
That's
So
right.
what's
Absolutely.
next for you? What is your dream in this third chapter? I think you're calling it of your life of what are your hopes
You
and
know,
dreams?
listen, I think it's really about just, loving on my family, being there for, the family, as I've tried to be, doing a little bit of travel, my wife and I, and I think, and then, staying close to the work, but I don't think I'll be as immersed in it as I had to be as a corporate, person. But I am, finding, and people are finding their way to me for different things. And so if I could be of help, But I think, really, it's really about, leaving this legacy and hoping that it continues, right? It's really about love and family, respect, service, fairness, educating people and then finding purpose, right? I tell all young people that. I had another one of these letters I would have read you, but it was from a college student that I met in 2016 that she wrote me an email and how much she enjoyed the time as they were interns. And I had a group of them that I was working with. But she took the time to write an email to me. And she said, one of the last things she says, I really can tell that you're really an authentic person. I appreciate it so much. She says, I only hope I can make the type of impact you made on other people's lives. And, as I was preparing for this, I went to see what she's doing now, right? Because this was about 3-4 years ago. And so she's a consultant at, I think it's Accenture.
Wow. Wow.
And that's where she I think she had a BA in economics or something like that, or studying for a BA in economics. But there she is making an impact. And I hope that, she's courageous, and I hope that environment allows her to act and model the behavior that myself and probably others before me or after me, demonstrated for her, right? Because a young Black woman, I wanted her to know that, there's power, you got power. But what you do is when you come into an environment, be it, working for, Ed Long or Walmart or wherever, you're wanting to put some points on the board. And when you do that, you have earned the right to be as candid as necessary.
Yeah. It does lead to our topic that I love. It's like, what are you going to do with that seat at the table once you get it? That is a particularly, I don't know if it's just a woman thing. It probably is not just a woman thing, but I'll speak for myself. I found myself at tables where I have to really push myself to open my mouth. In a nice, respectful way. I'm not, saying being sassy or anything, but you get a little overwhelmed, intimidated. I don't know what it is. It gets easier. You just got to keep walking the walk and doing it. And I think that's profound advice you gave her. And I hope she really took that to heart of, you do have power and we want you to show up. We want you to take the risk. We want you to speak up. Yeah.
Well, you know what, Laurette, what I found is that you have to be a good listener when you're in the room, because then you'll know when you're supposed to speak. Right? If you're just sitting in the room, twiddling and, you hear some parts and you're tuning out others, then you're going to miss your opportunity to exercise that muscle. So I always listen to everything leaders say. I listen to every contribution in the room. And in fact, I've been known to say, when someone says to me, well, Michael, I think what Laurette was trying to say, and I said, well, excuse me, I understood completely what Laurette said.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that takes that down, right?
Right.
First of all, you need to be respectful of Laurette. She was very clear. She spoke English. I understood exactly what she said. And I didn't have any questions, nor did I ask her for clarification. So when you come back and you try to, I think what she said, were you demeaning Laurette in that meeting? And I won't stand for that, right? Because I've had it done to me. So I know I'm very conscious when people say that. They think they're, putting a person on a pedestal, but you're actually tearing them down. What you could have said is, I agree completely with Laurette said. And if I could add something on, well, then that supports Laurette in my mind, right? And if I'm sitting in the room, that's how it comes across to me, right? The other way is not healthy. And so Laurette may now go into a cocoon and stop talking. And that's the last thing I want, because now I'm not getting the full benefit of who she is and what she brings to this organization, right? And
you are so wise. That's a big one. That's big.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, as it's happening to Laurette, she doesn't even see it.
That's right. Well,
she walks out of the room and goes, why did that not feel good? You might not even know it at the moment.
And of course, Laurette, it's not just Laurette, it's Michael Byron too. Right? Yes. I'm sitting there and it's being done to me, and I may not be able to see it or hear it or think it's okay because this is the loudest, the highest level or has the most initials in front of his name. So, you dare not say anything. But as time goes on, you get the right and you have the ability you've earned the right to say what I've said in rooms for many, many years, right? And in some cases, I'd wait and take a person to the side and say, let me tell you how that made me feel. Well, because when you
And that's a
corrected them,
very mature thing to do. And
yeah,
I
yeah.
think that is absolutely the healthy thing to do if it doesn't feel comfortable in the exact moment.
Exactly. And because there are moments that it's not suitable, right? So now here's where, and people take it to heart. I had people stop speaking to me because of it, but I guess what? I was in the meeting with the person next week. They never said that, not a word. They never tried to clarify anybody after that, right? But they see me in the hallway, it used to be more chummy or a little bit more dialogue at the coffee pot, but that stopped. But that's okay because I'm hoping you're a better person because I pulled your coattail, and I did that in the spirit of collegiateness, not hate, not trying to make you look bad, right? So, of
And I think authenticity. I think that you are a very authentic
course,
person, and it's
yeah,
so important, especially in the roles that you've had. And I could see you. What I would love to see, and I totally agree. Travel, take time. Don't be as crazy busy as Walmart was, but I could see you really helping some other corporates set up their programs as well as your program was. I think there's lots of them that could use your help. So I hope
yeah,
that's
and
in
that's
your
a
future.
conversation too. But I want to limit it, right? Because I don't want to be on
Right.
call.
Right. Right. Because, yes, we all need a little, the
You know,
pace can be a little slower.
But what I'm really hoping for is, an advisory or board position with a WBE, MBE, some sizable person who could afford to pay me a few dollars. And because I want people to, you said something earlier, and I have a company that I'm working with now on their own supplier diversity program, right? And how they're going to do that. And so they want me to help them. I'm helping them with strategy, but I'm making them own it. They're having to work it. I'm not building it for them because that's pointless. I'm going to come in and talk to you about what you already know. You already know what you should be doing, right? So now it's just a matter of understanding who you're working with. And then when the next contracts come up, how are we going to implement this? And then how will we track it? How will we measure the success of it? And we need to measure success beyond the transaction, right? You need to know the true impact of what you've done here in your supply chain. And then that's a force for good. But then the other part is teaching companies that, you can do good while doing well, right? And I'm finding, you said something earlier, a lot of these younger entrepreneurs, they're coming with both right now. I mean, they're wanting to do, while they're doing well, they want to do good. So they have both strategies aligned and they're working them both at the same time. And some people I've had to say, well, look, if you want to do well with us, you're probably going to have to table this for a minute and focus on your business because you can't afford to be late. You got to be on time, in full, and when you get that going, then that affords you the ability to do good, right? And so, but never leave the for good. Put it on the parking lot for right now and then start it back up once you're doing well enough so that you can afford to do that. And that means that it may not be you trying to do everything.
And I think good doesn't always have to be dollars. It can be time. It can be all sorts of
Exactly.
different ways that you can do good that, until you can
Exactly.
get up to and we have a foundation that I love. I was very excited when we finally could start our own foundation and figuring out, where you want to make your impact is really fun. Really, really fun.
Yeah, I love it. I love when you guys find that for yourselves. I've heard so many people say it. I've got a couple of good friends who are in the wine business, and they have a foundation helping to bring people of color and women into the wine industry, specifically women, because it's such a male-dominated space, right? And
Yeah.
they're knocking it out of the park. It's unbelievable what they've been
What
doing. And
Either you tell me offline or sometime, but so we do baskets at the holiday season for customers and such, and we always try to make it like diverse, woman owned or what have you, basket. And wine is one of the things we like to throw in there. So I need to know who they are because we always
the
are looking for good
McBride
women
sisters,
wine.
I can tell you the McBride sisters. Just look them
McBride
up.
sisters. Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds
Yeah,
good.
yeah, they got a wonderful story. You ever listen to Guy Raz, How I Built That?
Yes, yes, yeah.
Yeah. So when you have some time, go listen to the podcast, How I Built That, and you'll hear their story. The first 50 minutes, you have to have Kleenex because you'll be crying, right? And
Yes.
then
Love those stories.
yeah. And then the second portion, you'll hear them mention my name. I didn't know they were going to do this. One day, they sort of psyched me up for it. They said, go listen to our podcast. It's fantastic. Da, da, da. And so then when they began talking about me, I was in tears, right? So it's two
Oh, I'm
young
going to
women
go
I met.
listen to it for sure. I'm
Yeah.
excited.
It's all about what we've been talking about the last hour. That's what they shared with Guy Raz. So, it was
We're going to get
wonderful
good
to read.
about putting these types of things in our show notes because, where there's lots of little tidbits that we come up with in these podcasts, and so people can go look for that too. Okay, Michael. So I ask all of my guests this. What is the legacy that you would like to leave behind?
The legacy that I'd like to leave behind is to continue to represent love, family, respect, service, fairness, education, and most of all, finding your purpose, right? I just want people to have that experience because that is really it's a fulfilled life if you get to that point, right? You have all of those things working. You're able to, to exude those things.
I
And you're
totally
able to,
agree.
yeah.
It's finding that, we've talked about this before, but finding that intersection of, what you're passionate about and what your calling is and what you're good at and living that life. And it really is, it's a lucky place to be. And we were saying earlier, I was saying my son had that Sunday dread thing. And like, you don't ever want to go to work or have a career where you have Sunday dread and you're not looking forward to your Monday morning.
Laurette, we have to experience that to get to where we want to be, right?
That is
Yeah.
so true. You got to
Yeah.
know what you hate to know what you love.
Yeah, that's
Very,
right.
very
That's
true.
right. Because you'll have appreciation for when you get to that position. Remember, he'll be in charge of some people one day, and he doesn't want them to have the Sunday drag. So he needs to know what to do in order to prevent that. It won't be foolproof, but he'll at least be working toward it. And I think that's the thing. Everything we go through is experiences to take us where we're supposed to be at the end, right? So
To learn
I think,
learn what we need to learn, and definitely, I think
absolutely.
that's some of my best learning. Well, they all do. All the best learnings happen in those hard places.
Oh, absolutely. They do. They do. I appreciate the time.
Okay, this has been so fun, Michael. I miss
Good.
you.